Hey guys, aka 88 on Cars here. My YouTube video today is talking about why I sold my 400 brake horsepower plus CivicTypeR Supercharged. It's a great car, you'll see loads of videos on my YouTube channel of me drag racing it, taking it around various circuits. But there are three main reasons why I sold the car, and I'm going to explain that to you today along with some footage that you haven't seen before and sort of track days and events where it went a little bit wrong. Let's get into that. So let's start with form factor. So I actually really like the look of the car. The shape I thought was really great, and it was the red colour is amazing, especially when paired with the black details. I liked lots of the standard small aero details as well as the various things that I added, the splitters and some of the diffusers. They were quite cool. And actually the other really great thing about it is the paint didn't wear. I've had cars before whereby if you drove them sort of at any marginal speed past a car coming the opposite way, or there was a puddle, the paint would chip and be a nightmare. But I drove the car sort of 12 to 15,000 miles in the end, and actually there was very little paint wear by the end of it, which I was really impressed with. I actually really like the engine in it. That K20 is a different animal when it's supercharged or turbocharged. I actually previously had a Honda S2000 and Muse. There's a whole other story about that car which I could go into detail if you're interested in. That car has a slightly different version of this engine. I think it's called the F20, and I'm going to break some hearts here, but that engine is just not powerful enough in that car. I came from a Porsche Boxster S into that car and it felt like a real step down, although the looks of the car and how the car actually handled were incredibly good. Those two things I thought were great, but it was front wheel drive. And I'm going to explain the reason why I felt that was so much of an issue the longer I owned the car when I cover the next 2 points. So let's cover point number 2. So now we come on to reason number 2. Now this might surprise some people and probably won't surprise a lot of others. With 400 brake horsepower going through the front wheel drive, the second reason I sold the car was it was just too difficult to get off the line. Now the car had actually had quite a lot of work done on the transmission. The drive shafts that were installed were slightly more beefed up. It had a limited slip differential as well as a much more responsive clutch was put in there, which were excellent mods. And again, having the LSD in the Civic probably converted me onto having LSDs in pretty much every car that I buy to keep that has a sort of sporty pedigree. I think they're a really, really underrated mod. But despite all of this, it was just very sensitive. There's some videos that I've had on my YouTube channel of me drag racing, poorly I might add, but there's some other videos that I didn't post, which I'll show now, which will probably explain this point a little bit more. So one of the main issues was, especially when I was driving at Santapod, which is an incredibly well maintained surface, is you would launch the car hard in first gear. The car would almost instantly hit the rear limiter grate. You'd go to select second and the gearbox just wouldn't let you have it. It would just bounce off and you would end up having to double declutch to try and get it in again. Perhaps the box would refuse the gear for a second time. By then you've sort of lost 2 to 3 seconds on your run, if not destroyed your run altogether. Now it's worth saying that the gearbox on the car had been gone through fairly extensively in a short period of time ago. It was only sort of at the time 8 to 10,000 miles ago that the LSD was put in the box as part of the wider works done by TDi North when the build was actually getting put together, and there was nothing inherently wrong with the gearbox. And this is something that happened to me multiple times. So here you can see a clip of it happening again at Santapod. This also happened to me at North Wales as well, be it in a slightly smaller way, as the car that was fast forward to the year when a few other little bits and pieces had done again. But actually it was just incredibly challenging to do that, which effectively meant that you would almost drive the car and under rev it most of the time, which is the reason why most of the times of semi-successful clips I've got on, I've actually almost sort of starting at a granny's pace, just because actually at least the car would get off the line there. But super challenging. Now just before I sold the car, probably in the 6 months before, in fact, just running up into 2016, I did install a Hondata traction control unit, which was excellent. I can't recommend this unit enough. In fact, I'd like to have one of these traction control modules in any car that I spend some money on. It just allows us, it's the go-between between having the traction control completely off, which can create the issues of huge amounts of reel spin and then the gearbox's inability to actually take the gear. Yes, this is the reason why people do dog boxes, because the dog box or sequential box will take the gear regardless of what's happening in the engine, how fast the box is spinning, how fast the shaft is spinning. That's the reason why you have, dog boxes and those advanced sort of gearboxes per se. And that traction control unit made it a lot better, and it just allowed you to dial in a set amount of slip. That being said, even after those videos, we played around with changing where the launch limiter was coming into, and actually what we found was we really couldn't launch the car much beyond sort of 3,500 RPM. Otherwise, it would simply just spin up first. Now, the temptation is to launch the car in second, and if it was an out-and-out sort of only sort of sports car, not as the Civic was my daily driver, then maybe second gear launches would have done the same or done something better. Obviously, you run the risk of annihilating your clutch or annihilating some part of the drive shaft, perhaps even something in the hub. I've had that before. I had this Corsa B with a C20 LET in it where the hub actually split in two. That was an aftermarket shaft. That car was a bit of a beast, actually. Actually wanted to kill me. Most times I drove it, which was one of the reasons why I love the car so much, and one of the reasons why, despite my better judgments, I always seem to point back to performance cars over sort of those other sort of Porsche prestige quickie cars. These days I actually do like the sensation of a car that you can drive at its full limit and it's not totally safe. There's some great appeal in that. Now, the third reason might actually be a bit of a surprising one, but actually this was more from taking the car on track days such as Anglesey rather than straight line speed and sort of daily driving. But the third reason was weight. Now, that's a surprising thing to say because the FN Civic is actually not that heavy. According to Google, the weight is approximately 1,350 kilos. So by modern standards, that's really not a lot. Most modern hatchbacks coming out in 2021, 2022, you're around the sort of 1,500, if not the 1,600 kilos on sports models as well. And I think technology has come a very long way since 2007 when my Civic was produced to now to deal with that weight. And you watch lots of car channels, there's lots of people that are far more intelligent than me talking about all the innovations that's happened to chassis design as well as suspension design to help achieve that. But for the car that it was at the moment, again, it was my daily driver, so I didn't really want to go around stripping parts out of it unnecessarily. Again, if it was a hardened race or a hardened track car, I guess we could lose quite a significant amount in that weight. I saw a video on YouTube a little while ago of a chap that was in the US who was racing an E46 BMW, I think, and he managed to lose sort of 250 kilos by stripping out just sort of soft interior parts, which I thought was amazing. But that wasn't the case for this car. It still needs to be my daily driver. Now, what I found is when I was driving the car, especially in some really tight hairpin corners, that there would be a lot of, you could feel there was a lot of weight and a lot of pressure on the tyres, despite, great suspension that was properly geoed, as well as great brakes. There was just a limit to the traction that the car could have. This exacerbated it, even though the car was running DC5 Brembos as well, which are great 4-port front calipers. When I was on Anglesey doing, a number of hot laps, again, I did experience brake fade there, as followed by significant understeer, and that again is mainly the brakes. Just hitting the roof, despite having great race quality brake fluid in as well as sort of Ferodo sort of semi-track day pads in there and really decent discs, as well as I think I had Federal RSR tyres on there. Great tyre, really like those tyres as well. And the issue still happened. And you could just feel the corner in certain sweeping corners that the weight was holding it back. It limited the entry speed as well into many of the corners, which over rear-wheel drive cars was, even cars that were as heavy as the car, was really holding it back. So weight is the third reason. So I hope those three reasons were interesting. I hope the extra footage I showed of my inability to drive in any logical format was also mildly entertaining. Again, these are just things that happened in my personal opinion. I am certainly not the world's best driver. I'm probably very average by all accounts. I am a enthusiastic amateur, but I think it's important because I think actually in the grand scheme of this, most of us are perhaps in that spectrum somewhere. There will be the few of us perhaps watching that are sort of incredibly great drivers or pro race drivers that could have done a lot better. But actually I think it's important to kind of listen or sort of think about these things in the round, because actually, you know, probability wise, that's probably where most of us will end. Let me know in the comments if you think I was right to sell the car, or whether you would have kept it and put more money into it, or whether you think that I missed any reasons, perhaps to consider something else. Like I say, at the moment I'm working on my late father's VX220 Turbo, a car that I'm really enjoying driving and working on, and I hope you'll subscribe to the channel and enjoy the content with me some more. I've got much more to do to the car. Suspension and chassis is going to be next, and then some engine stuff afterwards, so lots of really cool updates to come. Hope this was a good video. Thanks for your time. See you soon.